but the remainder of it did go to legacy system sustainment. So we need to prioritize the retirement of the legacy software systems with the thought of how much they cost, and ideally eliminate, sunset the programs that cost the most at the earliest opportunity if the technology will allow us to do so. And that is one of the things the program manager and our contract staff are taking a look at. And then finally, oversight is another key piece that we looked at. And not this form of oversight per se, although, again, I'm happy to be here. We also looked at the relationship between myself and the GAO, myself, my agency, and the Office of the Secretary of Defense, and my office, my agency, back with the Performance Accountability Council about transparency and accuracy.
And let me go back to this subject of continuous vetting. I said in my opening remarks, not only was I fearful that good people were not being allowed in, but that bad actors had slipped in. So this continuous vetting, which I understand now is more than just enrollment. It's like, do you drive? Yes, I have a car. Have you driven in the last year? No, I have not. I'm very much concerned about how you go about prioritizing the continuous vetting. So should I assume that the people with the highest clearance are not only enrolled, but are being continuously vetted?
Yes, sir. But again, as Ms. Ziz says, it may vary based on where they are. Because again, they're all eligible, they're all enrolled, but the extent of the monitoring may vary. I have statistics here that I could give you for fiscal year 24, Ranking Member, if you'd like, about the performance of CV.
Yeah, I'd rather you give them to me as part of your written testimony. I don't have much time here, but I do want to go back to the GAO here and to ask, you talked about your real recommendations to the agency would be to deal with their scheduling, their costs, their cybersecurity issues. Could you take this last minute and speak about that, please?
Yes, I'd be happy to. And we are looking forward to seeing the new roadmap and plans, but I will say that we have reviewed multiple NBIS roadmaps over the years, and none of them had reliable schedules. In fact, when we did a review in 2021, it was unreliable. In our 2023 report, when we re-looked at the new roadmap and new schedule, it was actually worse than the 2021. So it's great that new plans are being formed, but it's essential that you follow best practices for integrated master schedules to get the plan right, or else we're just going to keep repeating this over and over. I'd also like to mention on the cost estimate, very, very encouraged to hear that DCSA is going to pursue an independent cost estimate. That was one of the recommendations we had according to our best practices too. I mean, the point about already spending over $1 billion, $1.5 billion on the program with several more years, just keep in mind those estimates were unreliable too. So it could have been more. So we don't know. So, right, so when we're at a point now, and Mr. Cattler's here, he's new, he's putting great things in place. We really appreciate that he invited us down. He's read all of our reports. He takes them seriously. But our best advice would be to just please, you know, it's great to move forward quickly, but make sure we've got these key program management principles in place. And the same with cyber, too. Kind of the main message of our cyber report last week with the 13 recommendations is there was limited oversight of cybersecurity within DCSA. So strengthening oversight of cybersecurity is essential as well.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, my time has expired. I would hope that perhaps in 6 months or so we could reconvene all over again and do a review of where we are, where we started, which is today, and where we will be 6 months later, just to have some contrast and some comparison.
Gentleman yields back his time. Thank you very much. As a matter of fact, we have talked about that and would aim for October.
Good.
Thank you very much. Distinguished gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Biggs, recognized.
Thank you, Mr.
Yes,
Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, our witnesses, for being here. Ms. Ziz, I want to make sure I'm clear on this. From 2017 to 2022, it was $654 million. From 22 to 27, it's anticipated to be $700 million for NBIS. And then just on the legacy system, that $800 million, that's to date during this same period?
It's actually only from FY 20 to 22. That was the only information available at our last review, so it's much more actually than that.
For the legacy?
For the legacy systems, yes.
So I'd ask Mr. Cattler if you can get that information for us so we would know. You have it? Oh, well then, Mr. Cattler.
Thank you, Congressman Biggs. DOD has spent approximately $825 million on NBIS system development since 2016. That money was spent to build the end-to-end vetting system to replace the legacy systems, and that total of $825 million was executed under budgetary authorities by both DCSA and DISA before.
Okay, and that's separate than the 1.35?
The total is 1.35, because the remaining 40%, which is about $575 million,
Okay.
was spent on sustaining legacy systems to deliver the personnel vetting systems to DOD and federal agencies between fiscal '21 and fiscal '23, with the bulk of the 575 spent on supporting legacy BI systems, which we call BEAS.
And does that track with what you know, Mrs.?
Our number is a little bit higher than that. In addition to that 500 million-ish that Mr. Cattler mentioned, there are also costs to OPM because the legacy systems still reside on their network, and so they still have to maintain that infrastructure, even though DCSA is in charge of those legacy systems. So we have that at a little bit over 250 million more than DCSA stated.
I see. And then, and Mrs., you used the term unreliable schedule, and you mentioned it, receiving unreliable schedules. Tell us what a reliable schedule would look like, please.
Right, so we have 4 key practices that we're looking for that we assess integrated master schedules on. Comprehensiveness, so we looked at the schedule and we couldn't see that all activities were in the schedule. So it's kind of like building a house, but not remembering that you've got to get the permits, right? You've got to get electricity, you've got to get plumbing. All the tasks need to be in the schedule. Controlled is the second key practice. The schedule, when we reviewed it, was missing status dates for tasks, and we could not compare actual progress with a baseline. Credibility is the third key practice. This is being able to trace events to each other and have a risk analysis. There was no risk analysis on the schedule. And then well-constructed, logical sequencing. We could not consistently find sequencing between different activities. So in fact, none of those key practices were met. They were all judged as minimally met in 2023. They need to be all substantially met to have a reliable schedule.
So it'd be, with the logical sequence, you're talking about putting the roof on before you put the walls up.
Yes, good analogy.
Okay. So, and Mr. Cattler, I know you've only been on 93 days. And this is actually I want to give you a chance to respond. I'm not blaming you, but in your written testimony, you said the analysis of the NBIS program identified several key problems, including in oversight, software development methodologies, acquisition strategy, team competencies, and leadership. And Ms. Sis has identified some additional problems, and it leaves one this question, actually, as I read it, I kind of jotted this down. Actually, 3 questions. Why? What caused the problems? How do you cure them? And is there anything that you found going right? Because, I mean, these are pretty comprehensive and broad. So what's going right?
Well, thank you, Congressman. Let me start there, maybe, with
Yeah.
what's going right.
Yeah.
I think that, first, what's going right now in terms of strategic performance is that we are, in fact, delivering those 2.8 million investigations a year and the 10,700 of them a day, and we are satisfying that CV function, obviously, in order to get that done. We have delivered EAP as a key element of NBIS, and as I said, just fully restored again today. And the reciprocity work, again, under trusted workforce, is also, I think, a big deal in terms of overall performance delivery. In terms of who's to blame and who's at fault, what I would say is I think the investigation so far has indicated that there's plenty of blame to go around. We had many issues in various places within the program.
Before we run out of time, because you get to answer past my 5 minutes, I don't get to ask questions past my 5 minutes. So my question is, because you talked about culture of accountability, ecosystem of accountability, and you just said there's plenty of blame to go around. How do you mesh the blame to go around with the ecosystem of accountability? I mean, because you talked about hiring new people and getting the right people and everything. You didn't talk about maybe letting go of some people who shouldn't be there.
Yes, Congressman, we've had some people move on. We have, even in the time that I've been on board, have had to make some of those changes internally to the team. I think it's fair to say, too, that the dynamic of communication internally and external is fundamentally different now since the end of March. I have worked with my colleagues that are involved in my oversight now for more than 2 decades. know them very well professionally and personally. We are locked arm in arm on this. And I feel like I should also say to you that while it's not my fault, it is my responsibility to be sure that DCSA delivers on this set of requirements. It's critical that we do so.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Catlin. My time has expired. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for indulging.
Gentleman yields back his time. Thank you very much. Distinguished gentlewoman from Washington, D.C., Ms. Dorn is recognized.
My first question is for Ms. Stitz. Efforts to modernize the information technology system at the root of the U.S. federal personnel vetting process is years behind schedule and well over budget. In August 2023, the Government Accountability Office released a report that found DOD's development of that system, known as SBIS, lacked accurate cost projections and failed to meet 7 out of 7 schedule and cost estimate best practices. Ms. Stitz, why is an accurate cost estimate important to a project like SBIS development?
Right, well, thank you, ma'am. It's a key program management principle. Without being able to accurately project costs, you're at risk of cost overruns and you can't manage costs. We have 4 key practices for a cost estimate. It needs to be reliable, it needs to be accurate, comprehensive, credible, and well-documented. We found that DCSA's cost estimate minimally met 3 of these practices and did not meet the credible practice at all. It was not credible. We are encouraged to hear that they are going to do an independent cost estimate. That's key to doing that. But to be able to drive the program, we're years behind now. We're spending more than what was anticipated, but we can't really even rely on those numbers. So having an accurate cost estimate is key.
Mr. Kettler, GAO's report also found that DOD spent around $654 million since 2016 to develop NBIS. DOD also spent $835 million to maintain the OPM legacy information technology systems from fiscal years 2020 through 2022. In its August 2023 report, GAO recommended that Congress consider requiring DOD to develop a reliable cost estimate and program schedule for NBIS development. Mr. Cattler, has your agency taken steps to develop the issues with cost estimate and program schedule related to NBIS development, or does Congress need to enact legislation to get DOD to follow best practices?
Well, thank you, Congresswoman. I believe that we're well on the track to have the reliability in our internally generated cost estimate. It will go through many reviews within DOD and the interagency, for example, led by the Performance Accountability Council, among others. And as I've stated in my statement for the record, we will also contract out an independent cost estimate after we have an approved plan to be sure that that outside scrutiny tracks with what we judge it will cost moving forward.
Well, Mr. Cattler, how does DOD plan to pay for any and all next steps needed to complete development of NBIS? Do you plan to request additional funding from Congress?
Congresswoman, I'm not yet in a position to tell you how much all of that will cost and how we would program for it until I have the final plan and approval. But I can tell you that we have already programmed for ongoing NBIS-related work for development and sustainment, both of the NBIS program and of legacy software through fiscal 30 in our current plans.
Mr. Cattler, can I get a promise from you here today that you and your staff will meet regularly, perhaps monthly, with oversight staff to ensure the Defense Security Cooperation Agency is taking action to address all outstanding GAO recommendations and getting the NBIS system and Trusted Workforce 2.0 back on track?
Congresswoman, I commit to you that I will be open and transparent. I will push information to you, and I will be fully responsive to any request Congress has on any time basis.
Ms. Stitz, can Congress count on you and your team to assist us in this essential oversight?
Absolutely. GAO's role is to provide Congress with information to aid your oversight. We've been doing that for many, many years in personnel vetting. We very much appreciate this hearing today. That does kind of provide visibility on the work and move the ball forward. We're absolutely committed to continuing our oversight in this area.
Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlewoman yields back her time. Thank you very much. Distinguished gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Higgins, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Cadler, Ms. Sis, thank you for being here. Mr. Cadler, am I pronouncing your name correctly, sir? Because it occurred to me we didn't get it right earlier.
Yes, Congressman Cattler.
Okay. Mr. Cadler, my father always said this, ultimate is always one guy. It's one guy. And today you're the one guy. But we recognize the fact you've been on a job since March, so we're certainly prepared to give a fellow a chance to make necessary corrections and changes within his authority to correct some malfunction within the federal government. Let me say, this is a federal government that's spending $3 trillion a year that it does not have. So I'm one of those conservative voices that is, you know, call me crazy, but sounding an alarm, the amount of money that we're spending in our country that we do not have. We're borrowing this money, 100% of it. So you have a small slice of that, and it's what we're addressing today. But I appreciate your attitude, because you seem to be focused on actually fixing what has gone wrong within your particular agencies. So let me just, for the benefit of Americans watching, that you know, Americans have to deal with a lot of acronyms in Washington, D.C. You work for the Department of Defense, the DOD's Defense Counterintelligence Security Agency, that's the DCSA, and primarily what we're discussing today is a failure to roll out a program called the National Background Investigative Services, a new state-of-the-art IT system that will help your agency to handle the workload of dealing with 95% of the background checks and vetting that American government requires across the federal government. Was that an accurate summary of the task you have in front of you, sir?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and the NBIS program is years overdue and many millions of dollars at minimum over budget. So what we're asking of you today is, will you deliver the product? If we set aside the cost overruns and the budget issues and the fact, again, that this is a government that's addicted to spending money that we do not have as a nation, we set that aside, could we at least get some product delivered? And you appear to be saying, yes, sir, yes, ma'am, I'm going to get it done. Is that, am I hearing you correctly?
Yes, sir. I and my team will get it done.
Excellent. So the good lady seated next to you represents the Government Accountability Office, and they have made recommendations that historically have not been followed. Now, the GAO you know, we give them the responsibility to advise Congress on look into this matter, and say what can be done, and give official recommendations. And historically, that's not always followed, including in your agency. But now that you're in charge, does DCSA intend to follow GAO recommendations?
Yes, sir. We have already reverted to following GAO recommendations, and I and the leadership team will continue to ensure that we do.
Excellent. I do not claim to be an expert in your field, but I get the feeling that you claim to be an expert in your field, and congratulations, because you have a hell of a job in front of you to fix this thing. And then this committee is going to count on you to measure up. When I was in the Army in 1989, went through an original small security clearance. I was an MP in the Army. We required a little bit of a security clearance. I was surprised to hear that the Army had sent people to talk to I went to high school with. Like there was no computers, there was no IT system, there was no $1.2 billion to do it. They sent human beings to talk to the people I went to high school with. I recall being glad they did not speak to the people I went to college with. So America is less focused on some failure to comply with your budget than we are with the failure to deliver the product that America requires. And I believe I'm hearing you accurately, good sir, saying that you're going to follow the recommendations of the federal government organization that's responsible to give you recommendations, and you're going to drive forward with that mission. So I look forward to a report later this year. I thank you each for being here. Mr. Chairman, my time has expired.
Gentleman yields back his time. Thank you very much. Distinguished gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Conley. Excuse me, the gentleman, Mr. Frost. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Some estimates indicate roughly 4 million Americans currently have a security clearance. The Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency, DCSA, which administers the government-wide vetting process, identified more than 115 federal agencies and roughly 13,000 industry organizations that touch the Nimbus. DCSA is in charge of developing Nimbus, the IT infrastructure at the core of the personnel vetting system reforms. DCSA is also in charge of maintaining the legacy IT systems while it gets Nimbus fully functioning. And unfortunately, DCSA has to spend millions of dollars maintaining the old system as Nimbus fails further behind schedule. Deputy Director for Management at OMB, an agency trying to help us get this back on track, came before this committee and told us that continuous vetting should be covered for the entire clearance population in, quote, the coming months, end quote. Well, the coming months have come and gone. And so, Mr. Cattler, can you provide a timetable for when DCSA will be able to retire the legacy IT systems?
Congressman, at this point, I cannot until my plan is approved and we have confidence in the estimate for both the program management schedule as well as the cost.
Okay, cannot. I mean, this isn't the first time Congress has sought transparency on implementation as it relates to Nimbus, and the thing that goes hand in hand with transparency is accountability. So it'd be great to get a timetable as soon as y'all are able to provide one to the committee. The OMB Deputy Director also pointed to a shortage of technical talent. Mr. Cattler, have you at least acquired sufficient technical talent so we can operate the Nimbus for the full clearance population?
Congressman, I'm confident that we have the internal talent in our workforce to perform the personnel security mission, and we continue to retain them and hire new. We are also bringing on additional personnel relevant to the development of the NBIS program as we further understand where our key expertise gaps are.
Okay. Has Mr. Cattler articulated to you any lessons learned from the past challenges with Nimbus?
Well, Mr. Cattler has been in his role about 3 months now, and I would say maybe even 6 weeks into that role, he did invite us down to Quantico, and we went through all of our GAO reports. We presented the key findings and recommendations. He had read them all. he could even quote pieces of them back to us. He was, I think, committed and demonstrated a commitment to understanding our concerns. He asked us point blank how his agency had interacted with GAO in the past, and that he was committed to having a collaborative relationship in implementing our recommendations. So I think we are very encouraged by his early leadership here. He's got a lot ahead of him, definitely, and hopefully he can use our past work to guide him, and so we don't have a repeat of what has happened over the past 8 years.
That's really good to hear. Nimbus delays are serious business. Over the last decade, the number of clearance positions has grown more than tenfold, while the number of candidates remain stagnant. In 2023, the NSA announced its largest hiring surge in 30 years. The FBI requested $63 million from Congress to hire 192 new cyber professionals to protect American IT infrastructure against foreign threats, and all these positions obviously require security clearance. The Federal Performance Accountability Council's fourth quarter report for FY23 mentions system and IT outages as reasons for continued clearance delays. Mr. Cattler, have you identified what the causes of these IT outages were?
Congressman, yes. In the time that I've been the director, we've had outages due to issues with communications connectivity, but we have also had issues related to failure to follow proper procedures and internal controls. So to address these two at least, we have looked at alternative communications providers. We're working with DISA on that in order to move to different DOD-provided systems, for example, and different commercial telecommunications providers. And we are also taking, in some cases, punitive action against some of our employees and contractors to be sure that they understand and they feel a penalty for failure to comply with those established internal controls, especially, as you've said. They may, in fact, lead to a system outage that could cause loss of data as a potential worst outcome, but I hesitate to say a minimum, but at a minimum, certainly short of loss of data, a significant delay in somebody being able to even file an application for security clearance.
Are you reviewing and changing any of the standard operating procedures around this?
Congressman, yes, we are constantly looking at what our standing operating procedures are and the internal controls, and this as well will be part of the IG review that I've asked my IG to perform.
Perfect. Thank you both for all the work that you do. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back his time. Thank you very much. Distinguished gentleman from Tennessee, Ms. Birch is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Sis, I got that name right? That's a cool name, ma'am. I dig that. That's really cool. As the 435th most powerful member of Congress, I get to ask my questions last. Usually, as I like to state, there's usually a custodian in front of me sweeping up about the time I get up on the mic. So I apologize if these questions have been asked. I have trouble hearing. My wife says it's selective, but my doctor says otherwise. So if I've asked these questions before, just act like this is the best question you ever had. And Mr. Cattler, if you'd look at her and go, wow, that's a really great question, I'd really appreciate it. It'd do good for the folks back home. The status of the National Background Investigation Services System, where would you say that is at?
Congressman, it is unacceptably late.
Okay.
And we have underdeveloped the required capabilities to meet our policy deliverables.
Okay. It was supposed to be fully operational by 2019, is that correct? I know you've inherited this mess, so.
Yes, Congressman, that's correct.
Thank you, brother. And the projection of when it will be fully operational?
Congressman, we are programmed out through 2030. We aim in the current plan to have the legacy system sunsetted no later than fiscal 28.
Do you feel like the GAO, they issued this report, as you know, I'm sure, regarding the Defense Counterintelligence Security Agency's issue with cybersecurity. Do you feel like that they've dropped the ball on this thing, or do you feel like that they've got a good grip on it now?
Congressman, I don't think GAO has dropped any balls. I think their cybersecurity report is of similar high quality to the previous reviews of NBIS.
Okay. Ms. Sis, I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be asking you this or not. I thought I was asking you that, and he was answering, so I'm not sure. How can we have confidence in this agency that, and is there an investigation into what vulnerabilities had existed since it was took over in 2018?
I think with new leadership, we are encouraged that DCSA can get NBIS back on track, but they've got to go back to key management principles, the basics, right? Developing a reliable schedule and cost estimate for the program, enhancing oversight, and particularly with cybersecurity based on a report that we released last week. These are key fundamental program management principles. And in the past, the program has been so focused on moving out to deliver capabilities that they had told us that it was an administrative burden and a waste of time, frankly, to develop a schedule or a cost estimate. They didn't need to do that. They didn't need to follow best practices. Well, now they're years and years late and behind schedule and over cost too. We think that the tone is different this time from the top, and we're encouraged. But as they kind of re-baseline again, we would really encourage them to take a look at our recommendations and make sure that they're implemented so they're on a path to success.
So do you think we ought to fix these vulnerabilities, or do you think we ought to pull the plug on the program before it becomes worse?
The cybersecurity report we released last week, the fundamental cause of the issues was lack of oversight of cybersecurity, lack of documentation of key practices and processes. If you can strengthen oversight, I think that will go a long way. We do have an ongoing review right now that Mr. Cattler referenced. We're actually going in and testing the controls of the systems to look at vulnerabilities, so we don't have that information yet. We'll have that later this year. It'll be a non-public report, of course, but enhancing oversight of cybersecurity is key.
Mr. Cattler, what do you expect y'all going to spend on the National Background Information System as it moves forward?
Congressman, I need to get an approved plan from the DOD and
Right.
from my oversight officials, and then I can do the internal tally of how much it will cost, and then I'll confirm that through the independent cost estimate. I'd have to get back to you on what the specific number
I'd
is.
appreciate that. Is that normal operating procedure? Is that the way it usually works? I'm not, that's not one of these trick questions a lot of my colleagues ask. I'm just asking you that.
No, Congressman, it is not. And it's also part of the reason why I say it's unacceptable that I find the NBIS program and my agency in the situation that it's in. If we had followed the proper protocols and leadership had demanded the oversight and internal accountability that Ms. Ziz and her colleagues at GAO highlighted in their reports, I think you could make a fair argument that we would not be where we are.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all very much.
Gentleman yields back his time. Thank you very much. The gentlewoman, Ms. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since 2017, the department has managed to spend over $500 million on developing a new personnel vetting system, NBIS, with little to show for it. We have no idea when the project will be done, as well as no idea how much more money DOD anticipates spending. To quote GAO's report, DOD's estimate is minimally accurate, minimally comprehensive, not credible, and minimally well-documented. Mrs., when did DOD first estimate that NBIS system would be fully operational?
2019.
So that same year, but that didn't happen. This is briefly, what went wrong and what did DOD do next?
Well, as we've reported, the NBIS program did not have a reliable schedule, so they could not accurately project when they would hit key milestones. They actually moved their target many times. 2019 was the first target date for full functionality. It then moved to 2022. It moved to 2023, it moved to 2024, and now it will likely be years later. But the key underlying cause of those shifts was not realizing all the tasks that needed to be done to deliver that full functionality. So just a basic program management principle of having a reliable schedule to plan from.
So it wasn't until after DOD already missed their own deadline that they publicly reassessed and changed the timeline to then 2023. Mr. Cattler, it's now June 2024. Can NBIS currently perform all the necessary functions DOD needs from it?
Congressman, NBIS and the legacy systems together perform all the functions that are required, but NBIS alone does not.
So no. So DOD is years over schedule, over budget, and the country still doesn't have enough cleared staff to perform the work it needs. DOD has the largest budget in our government, yet seems to continue to make the biggest mistakes. lost in multi-million-dollar planes, failed audits, and this mess of a security clearance system. In addition to highlighting DOD's uncanny ability to fumble millions of dollars, I also want to take some time to pay attention to the extent to which racial biases may affect the security clearance process and may contribute to the underrepresentation of BIPOC staffers in the national security workforce. In 2022 and 2023, the RAND Corporation conducted research assessing whether racial disparities exist in the clearance process. I ask unanimous consent to enter these two reports into the record. I'm going to take that as a yes.
Without objection.
Thank you so much. Mr. Cattler, in its study, RAND observed that several societal factors, such as financial challenges and student debt, disproportionately affect minorities and may lead to increased perceptions of risk without considering historic context. How is DOD working to ensure that these risks are fairly considered in the security process? And specifically, what measures are in place to prevent these systemic issues from unjustly impacting clearance decisions?
Congressman, we work with the Director of National Intelligence as she performs her functions as a security executive agent on the adjudication guidelines. We also take a hard look when we do our quality control to be sure that we've wrung out any bias. As we identify it, we do make changes in those procedures, and we also hold our people accountable if they make errors or even act inappropriately to deny someone a security clearance based on one of the factors you've highlighted.
Thank you. Mr. Cattler, human judgment is a significant component of the security clearance process. What specific training programs does DOD have in place to help investigators recognize and mitigate their own implicit biases?
Congressman, I have to get back to you with a specific list, but I can tell you generally that we do provide bias training for all of our adjudicators with the recognition that it is a subjective process.
Mr. Cattler, again, as DOD increasingly relies on automation and machine learning for continuous vetting, how are you ensuring that these technologies don't perpetuate or exacerbate existing racial biases? For instance, what safeguards are in place to monitor and correct algorithmic biases in the clearance process?
Congresswoman, pieces of this are addressed, again, through the adjudication guideline review process and also the training that we're providing to all of our employees, including those that are working on those algorithms and the verification of their success.
Finally, Mr. Cattler, transparency and accountability are vital. Can you commit to conducting independent assessments of security clearance applications to identify any racial biases that may have influenced outcomes? And will you make these findings public to ensure accountability and foster trust in the process?
Yes, Congresswoman, I do.
Thank you so much. I thank you both for your time, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back her time. Thank you very much. We'll go to Ms. Tlaib. Gentlewoman's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much, Director, for joining us today. And I think it's great that we're here, that you're even here even early in your position as a new person. So I know my colleagues have, I think, done a really good job going through the issues regarding NBIS already. So I'm not going to repeat what's already been said. But I want to bring up an opportunity and put a marker down for my colleagues here in committee and what I do here regarding security clearances with my residents. What we're seeing right now, and folks might see it separate, but this is happening to Americans in my district, the no-fly list. And I know they kept saying, no one on, both of you can't respond to this, but I think it's really important, Mr. Chair, that here in Washington we again try to address critical issues that are impacting our residents. But the list that right now is being used discriminates against American Muslims en masse with little to no legal recourse for countless wrongfully included Americans. It's been a little over a year since CARE released an analysis of the FBI's so-called, quote, terrorism screening database that found 98% of the names included were Muslim names. For the record, if I can submit the report, Mr. Chair. And one of the things I want to also put into the record and read is also a transcribed deposition of the FBI of April 16, 2024, Mr. Chair. Without objection? Okay, great, thank you. So let me just go over this, and this is important, Mr. Chair, because I think this would intrigue you. On page 199, when the plaintiff's attorneys questioned the FBI about the effectiveness of the watch list, the question was, Federal law enforcement officers also encounter people on the watch list, correct? Yes, the FBI answers. And then Chairman Sessions, they go on to say, does the FBI know of any federal law enforcement encounter with a person on the watch list that has led to a terrorism-related arrest? And then they go on to say, so I don't know of any instances where local law enforcement was notified of the presence of an individual on the watch list and then made an arrest based on that. Why this is important at a time, again, this deposition was done 21 years, this is over a 21-year span of the program, hadn't arrested a single person on the terrorism-related charges because of the so-called watch list of Americans. Meanwhile, I have residents, even one of my local mayors, being harassed and wrongfully profiled at airports, detained for hours. Their phones are removed, Chairman. Phones. Canadian PM called me asking my team for help for innocent families that are also, no longer able to fly because of this watch list. These are American citizens. They have rights and deserve some dignity as the rest of us. And this is important because people think, oh, it's just Muslims. It may be Muslims today, Mr. Chair. But I don't see any reason that this should, again, be partisan, because after all, the FBI can get away with doing this to any group of American citizens. Today it may be Muslims, again, it could be another group that they target. So it is great, again, that we're talking about this specific security clearance issue. But Mr. Chair, if I may, please, we should talk about and hear more about this watch list of Americans and bring the FBI before this committee to discuss it. Thank you so much, and I yield.
Gentlewoman yields back her time. Thank you very much. I don't need to respond to the gentlewoman now, but I would encourage her to please come sit down with Mr. Mfume and myself, and would remind her that we have thousands of people who are here in this country who are watched, and two of them were in Boston. They were the Boston bombers. We knew that they were in this country, and we knew, all I'm suggesting to you is, would welcome that discussion. Mr. Mfume and myself, I'm sure would be pleased to listen to you, and thank you very much. We are now evidently on a vote. I have not had a chance to have my 5 minutes. Doubtful that I will use that. I had an opportunity over the last days to speak with both of you for almost an hour, perhaps maybe more than that. I want to go back to Ms. Sis, who made a statement which I consider to be extraordinarily important to this entire matter, and that was, regardless of the time frame, regardless of the money, it's got to be done correctly. I'm paraphrasing. Mr. Cattler, can you please respond directly back to that? Because as we were earlier greeting each other, I said to you I was concerned about the architecture. You said that architecture is something, Congressman Sessions, that we have that person here. Well, I assume that the experts, I used to do this at the organization up in New Jersey where we would do architecture things that determine the best outcome. Can you tell us, are you going to do, as you've heard Ms. Sis say, get this done and have it done correctly? Obviously, your testimony is within time, within the money. Are you going to get it done properly?
Congressman, we will get it done properly. I don't feel undue pressure to move quickly because, as I've said, it's important that we get it right. And if that takes a little bit of time to do, then I think that's appropriate and acceptable. But at the same time, I'm also mindful, as members of this committee have highlighted just in this hearing, that we are 8.5 years into a 3-year program. We are $1.345 billion spent on about a $700 million program, and every penny counts. The taxpayers are not just entitled to and expecting that we deliver the software with the capability that is required, but they know that we need it because they are entrusting. I have entrusted some of my most important personal data over the course of my more than 30-year career to the government. My own agency vetted me and validated me for my clearance while I served at NATO. So what we're trying to balance are those two things, getting it done right and taking the time to do so, but also recognizing that we are well behind and it is unacceptable. So we are trying to move with an appropriate sense of urgency, but we're doing so responsibly. But I have confidence in my team, in our partners, and in our oversight that we are working well together, and that we will fix this and deliver the capability that the American taxpayers need, deserve, and are paying for.
Thank you, Mr. Mfume. What I would agree on the statement, I'm sure he'll have a chance to affirm that, but get it done right. Getting it done right, we've not pushed you to a time frame, to a money allocation, but you have done that as a responsible manager, and you will be held accountable to that, and I appreciate you very much. Mr. Mfume, would you like to say anything before we go with Dodge Round?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank
Recognized.
both witnesses again for their testimony, both their oral testimony as well as what's written. I look forward to receiving any additional documents or information, and I look forward to reconvening in October so that we may have some sense of where we are today, juxtaposed against where we find ourselves then. And I would invite, on behalf of the chairman and myself, obviously, both of you to sort of be ready to come back to see us again. Thank you both.
Thank you very much. In closing, I want to thank our witnesses. I want to close the distinguished gentleman from Maryland. And I want to also say that without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days within to submit materials and additional written questions for the witnesses, which will be forwarded to the witnesses if we have those questions. If there's no further business without objection, subcommittee stands adjourned. I want to thank the witnesses very much.
Good job, Pete. Good job. Okay. Did they call the vote?
It's on.
Okay.
Have they talked with you about the thing we talked about some time ago, and that is Hawaii? Are you aware of that?
They mentioned it. That's on our list of things to go over to.